today we are honored to have one of Iowa's very own AAPI members as our keynote speaker. Professor Neha Mehrotra will introduce the Honorable Dr. Megan Srinivas.
Thank you, Tanzil. It's good to be here and celebrate the great accomplishments of our AAPI community and watch these lovely performances which are to come. I'm going to use my notes and talk about Megan, who's a friend and very accomplished representative who represents our constituents here in Iowa. Dr. Megan Srinivas grew up in small-town Iowa as a daughter of 2 immigrants, and mom and dad happened to be here. I want to give a shout-out. Currently, she's serving her first term in the Iowa House of Representatives, which is Iowa District, the House District 30. She's an infectious disease physician and translational health policy researcher who focuses on delivering care to rural, low-resource settings in the US and globally. Dr. Srinivas recently led an NIH-funded study analyzing legislative defunding of family planning health centers and is currently co-leading a World Health Organization project, which is advancing access to reproductive health in resource-limited settings. She is the host of the American Medical Association and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Health Equity podcast, Stories of Care. Do give it a listen. Additionally, she serves as the infectious disease expert for the Iowa Primary Care Association's Project ECHO. You'll be able to read about many of her accolades in the brochure that you should have received when you registered, but I just want to point out that, let me see my notes again, that she's actually one of the youngest members of the Iowa State Board of Education, appointed by Secretary Tom Vilsack. She's a national delegate of the American Medical Association, a senior Atlantic Fellow for Health Equity. She sits on Iowa's National Alliance for Mental Illness Board of Directors. Wow, that's a mouthful. And serves on the Iowa Supreme Court Access to Justice Commission. I could literally go on and on about her, but without much delay, I want to introduce to you Representative Megan Srinivas and let her talk a little bit about.
Wow, it's great. Hello? Ah. It's great to be in a room where people can pronounce my last name. No, thank you so much for those kind words, and thank you all for having me this evening with you. It is such a beautiful sight to be amongst you all to celebrate AAPI Heritage Month with so many voices and different faces and perspectives coming together. And because of that, and I heard we have so many different languages in this room, I want to hear a chorus of your voices saying hello in one of your AAPI native tongues on the count of 3, okay? Everybody ready? You have the word chosen, the language you want to use? Okay. 1, 2, 3. Oh, wow, that was beautiful. Give yourselves a hand. That was gorgeous. That was really cool just to see a small fragment of what we have here in our little corner of the world. Growing up, I had an older brother who was my role model and my mentor. And he could convince my mom of absolutely anything. Then my mom decided that this was a problem, that she needed to learn a way to say no to him, so she came up with a new answer. Instead of answering his request with yes or no, she decided to say, ask Dad. That worked for a few years, and then around year 5, along came baby sister, and Dad was no longer an obstacle. But we used our power well. We used it to convince my parents for later bedtimes, to get a Super Nintendo, and of course, to get a puppy. While it seemed like small little successes, small little things that mattered to childhood, what I didn't know at that time was that my brother was teaching me the 3 most important lessons I could ever learn. Those 3 lessons have taken me from a small child to where I am today and guided me along my path. The first of those lessons was the importance of diversity. And when I talk about diversity, I'm talking about difference of perspectives, whether it's racial and ethnic, age perspectives, gender perspectives, your lived experiences. It's about bringing those differences together, facing an obstacle. In this form, it was my parents, and having a common goal, such as getting that Super Nintendo, and figuring out how we could leverage those differences to obtain that common goal. It's the beauty of diversity. It is one of the most important assets that we have in our society, but the question is, as a society, are we using it sufficiently? Are there places in which we could utilize it better to enhance what's happening in our communities? We can see diversity being effectively used in many genres. When we look at culinary arts, fusion food, which brings together 2 or more different cuisines to create a whole new flavor and dish, is one of the most popular things happening in our society. Sublimotion, which is the most expensive restaurant in the world, is located in Ibiza, Spain. The chef at this restaurant decided that not only was he going to bring together multiple cuisines from around the world to create brilliant dishes, but he was going to bring in diversity in a different way. He was going to call his menu a gastronomic performance, where he brought to the table engineers, I think we have a few here in Iowa State, designers, artists, chefs, sommeliers, to create a performance of cuisine. And because of that, he now earns $2,400 per each person that sits at his restaurant. That is successful use of diversity. We can see it happening in the genre of music. African American folklore music combined with ragtime, blues, and swing to result in jazz, which is one of the most popular and profitable genres of music in our society today. We also see it in the business world. The Boston Consulting Group actually did a study where they found that diverse management teams, meaning once again, broad diversity, gender identity, gender, race, age, diverse teams increased revenues by 19%. Because by working together with those different perspectives at the table, they created more innovation and positive disruption in their fields. Singapore is a perfect case study of this. In 1965, Singapore obtained its independence. And in doing so, they already had multiple ethnic groups living within this small island. But like what happens in many places around the world, such as New York or Chicago, these ethnic groups would segregate into different blocks, called ethnic blocks, living amongst people who they were familiar with, that they had a similar cultural background with. So in 1965, when Singapore obtained its independence and was putting into place its first structure of systems of laws, it decided that one of the most important laws it was going to implement was common housing, meaning if there was an apartment block, a condo block, whatever type of multi-household block there was, they had to have ethnic quotas. So it couldn't be just one ethnicity or 2 ethnicities living within a building. It was 3 or more ethnicities, sharing space, living next to each other, amongst each other, learning from each other, forming friendships. And it was that they attributed to creating not just a feeling of togetherness, a feeling of harmony, but it was what created solutions to problems that had long existed, that resulted in Singapore being one of the fastest growing economies and having one of the highest GDPs in the world today. As we can see, diversity is so important in all aspects of life if we use it correctly. So how do we do that? That brings me to lesson 2, advocacy. By choosing a common goal, creating a plan on how to obtain that goal together, and implementing those steps, we were able to utilize advocacy to convince my parents that a puppy was not going to pee on my mom's formal rug too much for us to get. It took us 8 months of wearing them down, but at the end of those 8 months, we had a little barking bundle of joy sitting with us in the living room every single night. But it goes beyond just what you want as a child. It goes into the everyday world of the problems that we face as a society and how we have to use advocacy skills to overcome challenges and create the better world that we all envision. When this country was created, when the Constitution was created, women did not have the right to vote. It was decades, more than a century, of slowly wearing down society, of women working together to put up fights, to put up protests, to bring forward the concept and advocate for it every single day, before finally in 1878, the 19th Amendment, which gives women the right to vote, was introduced into Congress. It took another 42 years after that for it to actually be ratified in 1920, and nationally, women were given the right to vote. But there were so many small battles that happened before then. One of those battles happened in Illinois, when in 1913, they decided that they were gonna give women the right to vote in local and presidential elections. In that first election, women were not allowed on the ballot yet, but they were grateful for that chance to make a difference. And they decided that they were gonna show that together, by advocating, they could make drastic change in the community. So 2 women in particular, Ida B. Wells and Belle Squire, together formed the Alpha Suffrage Club, in which they decided that they were gonna enfranchise as many women as possible to create change. And the change that they were envisioning was electing the very first Black city councilman in the city of Chicago. An award that would normally only have 16,000 registered male voters, they went door to door, had people join their club, registered women one at a time, and eventually registered 7,290 new female voters. Because of those efforts, in 1915, Oscar DePriest was the very first Black man elected to the Chicago City Council. And women accounted for 1/3 of his electoral success. He eventually became the first Black person to be in Congress. And once again, we saw how advocacy, working together, bringing that diversity to the table, could create positive change. But it started with just one vote. One vote, which brings me to my 3rd lesson that my brother taught me: the importance of using your voice. It happens even at the most basic level. Just voting in your local election, taking 5 minutes out of your day and stopping along the way to just cast a simple ballot before you go home and have dinner at the end of the day. But it matters. It matters because it's your voice that can change the way our society functions. As a state legislator, I get thousands of emails, phone calls, direct messages on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, every single week during session. I'm hoping after sessions quiets down a bit. But each of those messages, as I'm responding, I log it into my records because I want to make sure that I have contact with those people again in the future and can follow up on the issue that mattered to them. But in doing so, I was able to keep track. And I found that between January 9th, when session started, and today, only 54% of people who cared enough about an issue to reach out to me, cared enough so passionately about an issue that they contacted a state legislator, whether it was theirs or not, to talk about it. Only 54% of them had actually voted in 2022. And votes matter. 10 of my colleagues who are sitting in the House with me won their election in 2022 with less than 1,000 votes. As few as 11 votes, 27 votes, 138 votes in many cases, which means every single vote matters. In the AAPI community, we are the fastest growing racial group in Iowa, with almost more than actually 79,000 UPI citizens living here in this state, the majority of whom can vote. In fact, between 2010 and 2020, eligible UPI voters increased by 80% in Iowa alone. That means not only do we have a voice, but we have a powerful voice, and it's our responsibility to use it. In Georgia in 2022, It was actually the increase in AAPI voter turnout that was attributed with being one of the biggest factors in deciding the election in December. We can create that change here. And I'm not telling you who to vote for. You can vote for whoever you want as long as you are using your voice. If you truly want to celebrate your AAPI heritage, celebrate your diversity, advocate for the things that you believe in, vote at the school board level where they decide what happens in our district, at the city council level where they decide how they're going to use economic stimulus for small businesses right here, at the state legislature level where we get to decide where we put money to fund Regents institutions like this or make medical and healthcare laws. Your vote matters. So, as a politician, I can never leave the stage without making an ask. And my ask of you is this. Let's celebrate our heritage by using our voice, working together, advocating, celebrating our diversity, and casting your vote so that way we can make the future that we want, both for ourselves, but our children and the children that come after that. Because it's the only way we can leave the mark that we truly need to in this state. Thank you so much.